Okay, it's right.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, that's a bit better. Great to be able to. Janice, I wonder if you could. Oh, great, the camera is moving in. Lovely. So again, welcome. Well, look, I'll reconvene the meeting. We adjourned at about just after 1:30, and we will reconvene. And I wonder if we could start our meeting with the karakia. And I'm wondering if somebody in the room could offer to lead us, please.
Sorry, Bruce, I'm not good at my pronunciations, I'm afraid.
Oh, so nobody's prepared to lead off? Pardon?
Might be you.
Might be me. Oh, okay. Actually, sorry, I just need to change my. Pardon?
Am I doing it?
Hold on. Oh, possibly. Ross is going to do it, Bruce.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Onahia, ki te uru tapu nui, ki watia, ki mama, ti nākau, ti tēnā. Te wara, ti ara takatū, koa rā e rongo, whakaraere, ake ki runga, kia tēnā, tīna hue tākia.
Thank you very much. Well, it's good. I find it great to get myself back into centre in the meeting, which is tremendous. So look, apologies. Firstly, can I just note, look, my deep apology that I'm not physically with you in the room today. It had been my intention, but matters arose, which meant it was the best way for me to do it was by way of Zoom, not my favoured approach. And I suspect not your favoured approach with me chairing this way, but I do appreciate your forbearance on it. Do we have any other apologies?
Mayor Martin.
Thank you.
That's not coming back.
Councillor Wood.
And Councillor Woodcock, yeah.
Right, if I could ask for a mover and a seconder to sustain those apologies, please.
Happy to move that.
I got a seconder. Thank you. Appreciate that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Brilliant.
Who moved and seconded? Sorry, can I just ask who moved in second, please? So
I move the apologies.
I seconded.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry there, Amy. I'm just probably just trying to get through some of the niceties. Are there any matters in the agenda that people need to raise potentially their interests? No, I don't. I doubt it. Looking at the agenda, I think it's reasonably straightforward for us. So I'd be surprised if everybody was. So look, I've got Mr. Ennerton, I think, is probably in the audience somewhere. He has asked to take public participation in our meeting. So, Mr. Ennerton, I invite you to come forward. Normally, I think we try and limit presentations to about 5 minutes before I open it up to members to ask questions of clarification. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. I think just in respect of a nice segue there with standing orders, I would actually like councillors to actually reflect a bit upon them, because I know last meeting that I tried to speak at, I barely raised my mouth and said a few words before someone was trying to raise a point of order. And I find that really odd that Councillor Plummer can sit in a meeting and call submitters idiots and nutters, and yet standing orders were incredibly silent. So I just would actually put it to you that you don't implement the standing orders even-handedly. Moving on to the annual report, I'm really glad to see that the statement of compliance actually had the statement in saying that the annual report was late. I'm still unclear as to why, for the previous annual report, council officers told me that they had discussed it with auditors and it didn't need to go in the statement of compliance, when the auditors and the Auditor General have told me there was an oversight and that they never spoke to South Wairarapa officers. Someone is not telling me the truth, and I do want that answered. Just in respect of following that, official information requests. I still haven't had a decent answer to how the former committee, the audit committee, discharged its terms of reference. That was requested on the 7th of November. I had a subsequent meeting with the CEO and whatever title Paul has, and it still hasn't happened. I'm disappointed that this committee is only going to look at the December results. Why aren't they looking at the January results? They should have been completed in the first week of February and certainly be available to this committee. Your next meeting's on the 29th of May, so you're only going to look at financial performance of the council for twice in the year at best. The fact that it was recently reported that Payne Farm's income didn't get allocated to the Payne Farm shows me that there is a strong need for the scrutiny of council's finances. I'll really pay close attention as you go through the financial reports that you've been provided. I'm really not sure how, for an expenditure budget, the general category actually has minus $324,000. So that's revenue, not expenditure. If any of you can follow the lines of explanation against the actual lines of numbers, you're doing much better than I can. I just note, if the balance sheet is supposed to be, is the balance sheet comparative supposed to be from the annual report as at 30 June?
No.
Or the cash figure,
Through the chair, no, it would be the budget figure, surely.
your actual year-to-date comparative? You don't have budget at all in this balance sheet you've presented. The cash figure certainly agrees to the annual report, but the totals don't. Okay, no answer. I still think you're taking far too much in rates, and that's evident in the additional rate income you have. You've got a profit, you're not needing that much income. You can reduce rates, and I don't see the point in charging penalties of $99,000 for people who are struggling in the first place. I also just question at some stage how the heck shares in farmlands is actually an asset. It's never going to repay and come back to you in cash. And I'm very dubious as to the investment supposedly in Wellington Water, whether you'll ever see that money back in cash. That's all I've got to say for this session. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Anderton. Remind councillors it's a matter of questions of clarification with Mr. Anderton on anything that he's said. There being none, I thank you, Mr. Anderton, for your contribution again, and appreciate you being here this afternoon. I suspect, as you've said, you will listen with intent in the way we proceed as the course of the afternoon carries on. I think we should just move a short note acknowledging the public presentation by Mr. Anderton has been received by the committee. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Do we have any extraordinary business or late items, Amy? I have been informed of none, so if there aren't, I would carry on.
There are none.
There are none, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes, we have 3 sets, and we've got, of course, perhaps the novel situation where we've been asked to also consider the Finance Committee minutes, with obviously the change in the terms of reference of the committees, including in particularly this one. So we have the minutes of the 25th of October 23, including the public excluded minutes of this committee, and we have the Finance Committee meeting of the same date. I'll move from the chair that we accept those as a true and correct record. I wonder if I could have a seconder from the old Finance Committee second, please. Marius, can you do that for me, please?
Oh.
Melissa, she's not on this committee though.
Melissa's got this committee.
Can't you comment?
No, I can't, because I wasn't on insurance, and risk. I was only on finance. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I was on assurance
So you
side.
don't actually have a seconder, Bruce, at this stage for either a confirmation of the minutes for either of those meetings.
Okay, well, look, I just was wanting to just round it off. So is there nobody in the meeting that was in attendance of the Finance Committee meeting of the 25th of October?
Yeah, I
Darren?
was. Yeah, Kay was, yeah, I'm going to remember which one that was, but yes, I think, I think it was.
All I'm trying to reflect is that, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, was there?
yeah, I was.
So all I'm
But
trying to
that was a
reflect,
month. I was thinking we'd had one since then, but we haven't, no.
so all I was trying to reflect here, Kay, is that we are for good reason blending the committees now, and we now have an audit, finance, and risk committee.
Yeah.
And and essentially I can sponsor the 2 risk committee meetings, and given you were there, I'm wondering if in seconding you can in effect sponsor the finance committee meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, Kay. Appreciate that. So look, is there any discussion in terms of accuracy or correctness of either meeting that or matters we need to pick up? Certainly the finance side, sorry, the risk committee side, it looks like the meeting that I was at. Kay, I don't know if you will have had a chance. Is there anything in the minutes of the finance meeting that you'd want to raise that looks like?
No, I had seen them and they were, as I remembered them, I thought we'd had a meeting since then.
Okay, brilliant. That being the case, I'll propose to put the motion that we accept these as a true and correct record. I've moved. Okay, seconded. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Right.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right. If we could then move into wait a sec, just get past the Finance Committee. The first substantive item, which is agenda item B1, which is the risk policy review and risk management framework, please. Jan, are you going to lead off on this for me, please? Any salient points?
Through the chair, obviously one of the first things that I've looked at when I've got here is where we were with risk and the risk management framework. So both of the documents that you have in front of you are an update of what we had before. This is the start of our journey to improve our risk profile and how we report risk going forward. Other than that, I'd take the report and the attachments as read.
Okay, I think also I'd like to reflect that as part of getting to this meeting, Jan and I did meet and we discussed, and I think I provided comment on the, I provided comment on the risk policy and risk management framework, which Jan has taken on board. So I wonder, members, in light of that, is there any questions or comments that you would like to raise? No? A couple of observations from me. Firstly, I think, Jan, thank you for bringing a degree of rigor and discipline around the approach to risk. And I think it's just important to observe the importance of various components of the organisation of the council around risk, and particularly our role as an audit, risk and finance committee. So I've been looking at the diagram on page 20 of our agenda, which actually has, I think, what you would call the 3 lines of defence, Jan, which is, I agree, which is just important to remember where and how we fit into it. So clearly there's the work of Jan and her team around maintaining controls and appropriate measures. First line of defence. Second line of defence is indeed what we are doing here today, which is making certain we have relevant management frameworks and policies in place. And the third, which is an important part of our committee's work program, is getting assurance through audit findings and the likes over the operation of council, so that we can be comfortable that good controls, put the best foot forward in terms of ensuring that our risks are managed and we achieve our objectives. And obviously the up arrows reflect the importance ultimately of all of those three lines of defence being centre and pivotal for us as a risk committee. And while the left-hand side does go to the leadership team, obviously part of our role is to work with Jan and her leadership team to understand how they are delivering on the first line of defence, which is controls. So an important little diagram, and this policy is seeking to set that. The second thing I just would observe is the management framework, really not the what or why, but actually how we will go about managing risk. For us, it's governing. For Jan and her team, it's managing. And again, it reflects the importance here that we align ourselves with sensible and good practice risk management, which is what this is actually doing. So on that basis, we are going back to my original point, through Jan, maintaining good corporate discipline over the council to institute this and see that it's implemented, and indeed it's aligning us with good practice. So that's useful. What I say, we're aligning ourselves with good practice, we've got to live it out. And so that's the challenge for us as a committee. Do we live out that good practice along with Jan and her team? So look, with those comments again, I don't know whether there's any potential question folk would like to raise at this stage. Otherwise, I'll move to the motion.
Okay, Kay's got her hands up, Bruce.
Yes, Kay, thank you. I'm glad you got your hand up. Welcome.
Yes, I was just wondering a little bit about terms of referred to the chief executive officer, and there might be a bit of semantics, but saying the CEO has ultimate responsibility for risk management at the council. I thought the ultimate responsibility was at the committee level, and that the chief executive was more for implementing, was responsible for implementing management of the risk policy.
Very interesting question, Jan. Do you have a feeling on that?
Yeah.
It's mentioning your role.
There's a governance role of the committee, isn't it, which is the really risk and strategy is at the governance level. And as I said, no strategy. Yeah, I thought that was where our heads were really on the chopping block. But the chief executive's role was to implement.
Through the chair, I think it's saying that the responsibility for risk management in terms of the operation sits with the CE.
Operation, yeah,
But this is for risk management. So responsibility for risk management, so managing the risk of the organisation sits with the CE. Then that reports through to both the governance at this committee and then through to council. So yeah, I just wondered if it perhaps should have operational word in there. Yeah, because just we can put operational, if you would prefer it to say the CE has ultimate operational responsibility for risk.
Yeah, I think that's more appropriate, don't you, Mr. Chair?
Well, firstly, Kay, call me Bruce. I'm like informal. Secondly, I hear your point.
You didn't know I was talking to you. Yeah, I was being a little bit tongue in cheek.
No, look, it's no worries. Look, I would, Kay, be comfortable if you were to make, or Jan, if you were to make that change. I think the thing that I would like to make a distinction on is that Jan, as chief executive, is responsible for risk management and the risk management system.
Yes, yes.
We are responsible for risk governance, and there's quite a definite distinction between the two, and it goes back to the governance management split in my mind. But look, in the way that
I totally agree, but I think when it says a chief executive and the word ultimate, it sounds like we can all put it on Genesis.
And if we think about it in the negative, if something went wrong, we have to look at ourselves also as governors. Did we
Oh,
encourage,
absolutely.
enable, and have the right systems in place? If you take, for instance, a very definite strategic risk for any unit of local government, health and safety, it just doesn't. While in the local government context, liability stops with Jan. A broader responsibility as office holders also relates to us. So
All
you
right. Well, I
can't
just thought
avoid-
those words
can't
were
avoid
letting,
ownership.
letting us off the hook more than we should, that's all.
Good on you. I like it. I'm happy with that. So I'd ask with that, Kay, are you happy? Are you happy with the wording about the role of the committee? Is it strong
Yes.
enough for you?
Yeah. Happy with the word about commission.
Brilliant. Chris? Colin, sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, I have to say I'm quite comfortable with the way it's worded at the moment, because ultimately the chief executive really is responsible for everything that is involved with council, and also plays a key role within governance. And from a governance perspective, there's probably a few things that could go wrong, but ultimately the chief executive would report to the mayor over. But ultimately, I see her role as being key to managing the risk and the mitigation of the risks within the organisation, either governance or operational. So that's my view.
Thank you for that, Colin. Yes, and look, certainly that's an important part of actually the work of our committee is actually to monitor the ongoing management of risk with Jan, and to get assurance that actually that is in play. So I think that's aligned with your comments, Colin. So I appreciate that. Rightio, well, that's very helpful in terms of the discussion. In light of that, Jan, is apart from, I think you're happy to make the operational change.
Yep.
Was there any other thought as you had put this on the agenda that you wanted to raise? You okay? Sounds like it. So if we could move then to the recommendation, which is we receive, and it's I believe, within the remit of the risk committee, to adopt the draft policy and to adopt the risk management framework. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Colin. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Right.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. So item B2, again, this is one, thank you, Jan, that you asked me to put my thoughts to, which I have. So look, is there anything that you wanted to, again, reflect and leading us into the conversation on this one, either Jan, or indeed I see Paul, your name's down here as well. I think Paul, you're in the background somewhere.
I would just bring to the attention that review wasn't due until 2026 because it had been reviewed quite recently. But when I went through it, I saw that from my perspective, there were a few operational gaps. So I've just done a review of the policy and enhanced it with some further control that I think it needed.
Brilliant.
Other than that, I'd take it as read.
Yeah. So, firstly, congratulations that you look for something called discretionary, and there's also things called sensitive expenditure. But I like the broader term discretionary, Jan, because these are areas that can be challenging for any public sector entity. And fortunately, we do have some examples of how this guidance should be pulled together, which often comes from the OAG, the Office of the Auditor General, and it's certainly seen that generally this policy, is aligned with that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, but you did have reference to the OAG guidance as you prepared this, or updated?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it's been important that we look to the entity that is the barometer for acceptable expenditure, albeit we have to still exercise our discretion within that boundary. So the critical question here for us as a committee, does this meet your test as elected members for not only does it cover what you think is discretionary, and B, do the principles or the guidance contained in it meet your test of reasonable? So I wonder if I could just, again, with those comments, leave it to any thoughts or comments from my colleagues there in the room.
Right, just, yeah, maybe you can't see my hand here.
I can see it. Sorry, I was just going back to my minutes over here. Colin, you go for it.
No trouble. I just, I like the document and the way it's worded and spells out everything. I'm just wondering what substantive changes there were from the previous policy, Janice, if you could, I haven't seen those highlighted. And perhaps,
quite a lot, actually, which is why there's no track changes on it, because it
Okay.
made it readable.
Yeah.
So in terms of the beginning of the policy, in terms of the principles, they're pretty much, as Bruce referred to, in terms of the OAG guidance.
Yep.
I've tightened up the discretionary expenditure approval process because it should be 1/1 approvals, as well as the expenditure reimbursement requirements to state date, amount, description, purpose, and the time frame for submission.
Yep.
Going into the transport one, quite a big enhancement around air travel.
What number's that one, Jenna?
7.2.
Page 44.
Especially with Air New Zealand now charging for seats and other things.
All right.
So if you go online and amend your booking, it will charge. So we put in an extra bit about taxi and Uber travel. Because in my previous role, we didn't have Ubers. They didn't exist in the far north, but they obviously exist here. So make sure we put those in.
Can they,
I guess you could get one from Wellington.
If you're in Auckland, you could, but anything north of the Brent, you would struggle with Ubers. May I put in some more clarity around meals and alcohol? Made it clear that for any parking or speeding fines or any fines while driving are the driver's responsibility. Entertainment and hospitality is somewhere that can really trip you up if you're not careful. So that's had an overhaul. Especially around the purchase of flowers, which sounds really inconsequential, but it can be a real pain. So it says that flowers that are required in any other circumstances, and I think that's other than recognition for significant events. So things like Anzac wreaths and things are not caught by this. Should be funded from internal staff donations. There may be exceptional circumstances where you step out of those, but they have to be approved by the CE to do that. I have had instances in the past where officers have just been sending bouquets because somebody's in hospital. So I would expect the staff to put their hands in the pocket if they want to send them. Reference to not being able to use loyalty reward schemes such as flybys or airpoints cards if you're purchasing on behalf of, so staff don't get the benefit from it. Then we've put in the bit about COHA, so we don't have a separate COHA policy, but we've enhanced the section in here about COHA and the process that we follow for that. And the use of credit cards. So again, there's not a separate credit card policy, but the use of credit cards is also included in here. And there is currently only one credit card within council, and that's held by the General Manager Corporate Services.
we had a credit card.
Yeah, now it's my balances.
We use it for online purchases, for travel bookings, those kind of things. And because we don't have a bank, we do have to use it occasionally for COHA when we need cash.
Oh, I think those.
Thanks, Janice. Brilliant.
Excellent improvements.
Very good. Thank you.
It is fantastic.
And so, okay, Colin, Martin, I just asked, does it meet your sort of sense of what's reasonable? I'm conscious that all of this, I mean, the importance of the discretionary element is that actually we are using ratepayer money. So I mean, I'm comfortable. So let me put my name to the report. I just want to do that sort of final check.
I think it's more than satisfactory. I think it's excellent. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments? No? That's great. Well, look, Jan, again, thank you. It's great to see just some cleanup of policy and getting things going. So perhaps with some confidence, I head towards the recommendation, which is that we receive the report and we approve and adopt the revised discretionary expenditure policy and guidelines. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Martin, I saw your hand. I saw the finger, so I'm observing now, which is good. So well done. I'll put the motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those
Glad I'm
against?
not an auction, Bruce. That's
The house.
The item,
Thank you. Oh, that's great. So item B3 is our tax governance framework. Again, this is about tidying up some approach, which is really good, Jan. So again, if you could just lead us off with some couple of quick comments, and then I'll see if folk have questions.
Through the chair, I couldn't find a tax governance framework when I got here. What this document does is it clearly outlines where council stands in terms of various tax requirements it has and its obligations to the IRD. There are a few instances in here, again, Bruce and I discussed this when we had our catch up, that refer things to me or to an officer I delegate them to. There were some concerns that Bruce raised that a lot of it was coming in my direction, but I do have the ability to delegate that to others within this framework. Keeping your tax in order is really, really important, because if you do get something wrong and you don't do a voluntary disclosure, you can end up in very serious waters with the IRD, with significant penalties and interest being charged. So this document just outlines the framework that we'll work within.
Have one before.
I don't recall ever seeing one. Actually, I must admit, when I saw this, I thought, have we had one of these before?
That I could find.
Interesting. Well done. Thank you. Yeah.
So I think the critical thing in this is that yes, firstly, we're recognising the obligation, and I think we all know, and particularly around things like whether it's GST, PAYE, which are, you know, those and the nature of those sorts of payments. If you get it wrong at the start, you can certainly climb pretty quickly into problems. So it's important from that perspective. But I think I hear your point that first and foremost, you're wanting to approach this, Jan, and encourage us as a council to see what is our responsibility, what is actually the right thing to do in relationship to tax. So in that sense, it's reasonably helpful. What interests me, Jan, I'll just perhaps leave this as a question, because I know I did ask you that, and I'm not quite certain I can remember the answer. Is that in effect you're going to report annually to us around essentially management of tax risk?
Mm-hmm.
Is there, are we planning any form of internal review about compliance with such matters as PAY, GST, FBT, if it's relevant, etc.?
Through the chair, it's on my radar to engage with those activities, and it will need external support to do that, because none of us here are tax experts when it comes to PAYE and FBT and how they operate. So as part of the next sort of 12-month process, I'll be looking to engage probably somebody like PwC or something to do those reviews.
Well, look, I mean, I'm encouraging you to do that, because I think you're quite right, and it might be that actually through that, I think I might have hinted that in some tax governance policies where there is an established function externally sourced in the way that you're talking about, you know, there is a 3-year program to get through the relevant areas of it. So look, I invite you to come back to us with that when you've had a chance to work that one through. But in looking to adopt this, I'm encouraging of the council to see that as I hate to say it, worthwhile expenditure, just to give the assurance that we are meeting our tax obligations both proactively and in a correct way. So that becomes really useful. Colleagues, are there any other questions you'd like to ask Jan at this stage? No? Okay. Makes me think, by the way, of Stevie Ray Vaughan and his song Taxman, but I know some of you might be old enough to remember that. I do. The recommendations are to receive the framework report and also to adopt this as as the tax governance framework. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Happy to move that.
That's Colin. Good. Thank you, Kay. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Narita keeps putting her hand up as well, but you just can't see it.
Right.
What, putting his hand up because he likes Stevie Ray Vaughan or because he likes
You have the next one, Narita.
Okay, but anyway, thank you, Colin and Kay. I'll put the motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Appreciate that. Right, if we could then move then on to what is new for the committee. Colin, I think I should just acknowledge, I think if I'm correct, you chaired the Finance Committee up until the merging of the two. So thank you for your work today. Time for the combined committee now to pick up the cudgels. Here we go. So, Jan, is it you or Charlie that's going to lead us through the salient points of the report?
I would take the report as read unless there are any specific questions. But just to refer to one of the comments that was raised in public participation, when our comprehensive revenue and expense statements show a surplus, that doesn't mean that we are charging too much in rates, because we have to account for our capital subsidies as income and they flow through the statement. So it isn't that we're creating a surplus or overrating the community. The fact that we have a surplus reflects the capital going through to fund the capital activities of council.
Mm.
I was actually referring to the 178k that rates is above budget.
Through the chair, I would respond to that in terms of your rates are set on the accounts at the day, and when you do your calculations for your prediction reports, you can get more rate accounts happening between your prediction report and your actual rate setting process. So there very often are anomalies in that space. So it isn't that we're overcharging, it's just that when you do your prediction report in May, between May and the end of June, we get additional charges and things change. And you will get some years you will get a bit more, some you'll get a bit less depending on what happens. But they're never exactly on point.
And certainly, Jan, as a council which has experienced subdivision, etc., we do grow ratepayers, which is a blessing in one sense. So yes, I take your point between budgeting and accepting a plan and the date you strike the rates. Firstly, there's always going to be movement, and as you say, often there's a wee bit of growth in it that comes to council as a result. Right. So look, if I was perhaps then just to work through with the committee the various reports, let's look at the statement of financial performance. I must confess I started obviously on page 64 with the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure, which as has been pointed out, the operating surplus has achieved a result that is better than originally budgeted. Jen, I think it's fair to say, looking at the reasons and indeed the ones that follow, this reflects probably two things, if I could summarise it. One is on the revenue side, we have received more funding from Waka Kotahi, which is the obvious reason you've given us, certainly in terms of amount, and that expenditure is a wee bit subject to the ability for us to foresee the phasing of our expenditure. and there are one or two matters there that I see in the reasons that actually there is a difference, which has given rise to this nominal difference of $1 million. But it doesn't strike me when I look at those reasons, because obviously the Waka Kotahi stuff's come in because we've had to spend more on emergencies, and because of some of the phased expenditure, that at this stage we would be significantly different from your budgeted position when it comes to 30 June. Would that be a reasonable analysis? I'm happy to be corrected, by the way.
I'm receiving nods across the room, so yes. I mean, in terms of the million, quite clearly under planning and regulatory services, we've got $816,000 more in income or more in that. No, that's cost.
Yep.
That cost.
It's the transfer.
The OPEX.
Yes, so I mean, I presume there are some matters there. You note that financial contributions are higher, which is presumably on the whole a general gain.
Yeah.
For
The underspend is actually sitting in wastewater.
Yeah.
Water and wastewater.
So I wasn't overly stressed then about the result as it stands. Could I ask a question then about the budget? And look, I'm conscious this reflects a wee bit about what Derek's said as well. Is that the budget set in the plan, or is that your forecast position? I take it it's the budget set in the plan, not the forecast position.
Correct.
When would you anticipate being able to compare this to a forecast position?
Deep breath.
Everybody.
Yeah, we need to get out from what's happening with the annual plan LTP at the moment. So It would probably be March. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, that's fine. I'm not wanting to. I appreciate that we're sitting in a very difficult year. Can I say it's a year of transition, even with you coming? So I'm not wanting to appear too, what's the word, doctrinaire over how we should be reporting. I think equally, when the chance is available, given our size of organisation, it will be useful to have a look at what is the forecast position. I think what I'm trying to say is, in reading this report around the statement of financial performance, at this point there isn't any significant red flag, subject to me being corrected, any significant red flag that suggests that we will be in a significantly different position than that which we've currently planned. That's a question, I guess, Jan.
I was reasonably happy when I went through these, given that it was the end of December.
Can I ask a question then? So firstly, before I get to my next sort of observation, colleagues, is there any question you want to ask generally about that statement of financial performance at this point? Jan, I wonder, just before I move off the executive summary, I was interested in the box which is titled Summary of Unbudgeted Items. And we have got the Three Waters Reform Transition Assistance, which is a carryover from 22-23. And I take it there's a balance outstanding that we could spend of 118,666. It's an interesting number, isn't it? With the ongoing level of reform, is that still available to us, or do we have an obligation to pay that back?
As far as I'm aware, it's currently available. There have been no moves to claw anything back. And that exists with the Better Off funding as well at this point. There's no moves to claw that back either.
Great. It was probably the reason I asked was that I had heard some comments around the existence around Better Off funding. rather than initially assistance funding. But if it's still good that we've got it, that's great. Otherwise, we've got ourselves a liability, and we're obviously aware of that. So at this stage, as we know it's secure, we've still got the ability to use it for the purposes for which we've received it, correct?
Well, we did receive permission to use it for that, didn't we? So presumably it's pretty hard to
Yeah.
rescind it.
Better off than me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because that was itemised for specific projects.
Yeah, I think Kay, I was reflecting also that if I recall correctly, the new coalition government has stopped some things pretty fast in their tracks, and I don't say that as a political statement, particularly in the transport area. So I don't take it for granted that what we have received necessarily, but is unspent, is not above being attacked. That's right.
Yeah.
That's an emotive phrase. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know. It's
We
something
might be in a position
concerned about.
Yeah.
But I thought, for instance, if we've been through the Department of Internal Affairs approval process for specific projects, that might be pretty hard to. Anyway, let's hope.
Not impossible.
No, nothing's impossible.
Okay. Right. So look, in looking at sorry, I keep wanting to call it the profit and loss, the statement of financial performance. I'm comfortable that I've got the issues there. Moving to the statement of financial position, just a couple of questions, I guess, Jan. I look at it both at what we have got here, and also trying to think through some of the prudential limits, which I presume you're talking through as part of the financial strategy in terms of the long-term plan and the financial strategy. So it is relevant that we consider the current ratio, because that then is a citer and on the liquidity ratio that will be required to have for our debt, and that looks like it's in reasonable form. I did actually want to raise a question, because I'm not quite certain, and I've forgotten my accounting, so I might need a 101 from you here, Jan. Rates in advance appears both in debtors and creditors. Can you just explain for me what the accounting transaction is? Why have we got $1 million in rates in advance and $716,000 in debtors, in creditors? I get the latter. I was just interested in the former. If you look at I'm on page 67, we've got rates receivable of 757. We've got rates in advance of $1,033,000. I'm just wondering how that could be a debtor.
I think one is ours and one is Greater Wellington.
Ah, okay.
I think the creditors one is Greater Wellington that we're collecting on behalf of.
So what's the SWDC rates in advance of $716,000 in creditors? Oh, sorry, you're saying the rates in advance and debtors is what?
One of them will be one's Greater Wellington and one's ours.
That shows environment.
So do you want to?
I was just trying to reflect that if I
making a pickle of this, Charlie, do you want to take over?
I was just trying to reflect. Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm getting a bit old. If I had received rates in advance, obviously my cash goes up, but I'm going to recognise on the other side of my ledger a liability, because it's for a future period. I was just wondering why we had rates in advance and debtors. How do you get it into debtors?
Can I come back to you?
Charlie, do you want to come? They can't hear you. You need to come to the table, please.
Yep, sorry, without looking into the detail of it, I'll need to come back to you. So
Look, very happy to leave it on that basis, but I just it was part of an explanation. I just wondered why that happened. And look, you may well come back and say, Bruce, you need to remember accounting 101. But it's I will stand corrected. Jen, I was interested in the debt position, and I know that we've got the comparison to last year. The approximate $29 million. That's where we anticipated being.
where we are, yes.
Where we are, is that where we anticipated being?
I don't know at this point, Bruce.
Okay.
That's still a work in progress.
Yeah. Look,
It's actually lower than we were anticipating due to some delayed significant projects.
yeah, so the CapEx, it's the achievement of the CapEx, Charlie, that is affecting that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, rightio. Can I, look, Charlie, perhaps while you're there, because I suspect you're the corporate memory here. It certainly predates my time. I noted that we had smoothing loans from 2021 of $1.5 million. And I also noticed there was actually a small amount about additional funding. I make some assumption that has been borrowing to meet OPEX. Would I be correct in that assumption?
That was a borrowing to, yes, reduce the rates increase in that 1 year. That was, remember, the COVID year.
Yeah. Look, again, I'm not necessarily making any sort of moral judgment about that decision. What's the, or I call it the plan B, what's the plan to repay that though? What sort of term, I mean, given we are naturally categorizing our debt in these ways, this would be one that I would assume we'd want to be pay back reasonably fast.
First April to the first. We'll be on page 68. Summary of borrowers.
That's part of the review we're doing, Bruce, as part of how we're resetting the borrowing position as part of the annual plan.
Yep. Look, every local government entity's got its balance sheet under stress, and I want to reflect. I've had a number of discussions around the country around is it wise, is it feasible, can we use it this way? Well, I mean, the answer is I guess technically you can, but equally you always want to know what is the repayment program, because it's paid for yesterday's groceries. So look, that's good, Jan. That's something then that I would appreciate if we could have, obviously further discussion on at our next meeting as you develop your plan, because I presume that's probably going to fall out of your LTP work. So I'd be deeply appreciative of that. Noting that you've got to keep a sense of proportion. It's not the largest part of our external debt. And indeed, your point, Charlie, that it's primarily driven by our capacity to deliver on our capital program, which I appreciate. I'm probably getting used to some of the funds and accounting that we have, Jan, and possibly you are too. So I was interested in the balance of reserves, but I didn't have any particular question as far as that's concerned. It often interests some of the niche interests inside the district, and I don't know whether there's anything there that is astonishing or not, but I don't have any comment on that, and I don't know whether anybody else has. I doubt it. So let's keep going. So look, the Charlie, you've already hinted that debt and capital. Well, I've stated it. Debt and capital are related. I just wonder if we could have a little understanding. Now, I'm trying to understand where we are in the capital program relative to where we planned to be. Am I right in looking at the bottom of the column, and I might have been too quick on my numbers, where it says the percentage of budget spent year to date is 26%?
Right.
Correct, yeah.
Right, that's a challenge, isn't it? Given we're halfway through the year. These numbers are halfway through the year. And probably the point you're making is that that's also going to reflect that our debt come 30 June will be lower than anticipated.
Yes.
However, 26% probably isn't the number we're aiming for, he says. Trying to say it a nice way. I think perhaps what I'm trying to reflect is, and it might be, Jan, I'm looking more your way, strategically, this is a challenge because we want to spend, when I say, without wanting to be frivolous, we want to spend this money because it's about maintaining or delivering levels of service. Is this on our mind at the moment that we are so far behind halfway through the year?
Very much so. some of those items, there are carryovers that need to happen into the APLTP process.
Yeah.
I have shut down my laptop, so I don't have it to hand, but I don't know, Stefan, whether you have that list available that you showed me that James is carrying forward. There's 1.5 million in there, I think, for land purchase in Greytown. That is a big part of the gap that we're currently seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, in public amenities, there's a large $1.7 million line item for green space in Greytown, where values at the moment are very high and the type of land that we're looking for fairly scarce, which has held that project up. We also have a couple of large projects like the Greytown Wilkes Park, which have been delayed due to supplier ability, but will come online in the coming months.
And in the IT space, we've got some movement in the next half of the year in that space as well. So I'm expecting those to pick up.
Purchasing of new servers and hardware. That was delayed with that due to the accessibility of the equipment. The fact that a lot of it has to be imported, so as well as the expertise to do the work. So it's slowed a little bit, unfortunately.
And on that, what's the under the council officers carried forward budget?
The 250,000.
Yeah, that's
So that was from several years ago. 500,000 was approved to for that.
The roof. So at
that's roof.
Yeah,
at the moment, we're looking at some immediate security upgrade to Kitchener Street because it's quite open. So I've asked them to review the reception area with an action plan to improve security in that space, and also to start looking at potentially what we would need to do to secure the roof space.
I think.
Look, thank you for that. And look, Stefan, for good reminders that actually, you know, our capital budget in a nominal sense isn't large. It's large for us as a district council, but you know, I hear your point. If you can't buy a reserve at $1.5 million or your budget, or something's not available, that does have a fair whack from a percentage perspective, given the numbers are so low. Jan, I think you've said you are looking at this. One of the things that I will be wanting to focus on, if I could just put this as a hint, so if this comes back in front of me, you know where I'm going to go. I'm very interested in the renewal aspects of because that's actually maintaining and preserving what we've got. Now, I don't doubt the other stuff's all really important, but I would be wanting to suggest that actually there needs to be a level of focus. Can we carry out the renewal program? And if not, why not? Because, you know, I'm talking to you from Wellington, you know what we've got over here. Now, we don't want to, you know, we want to be in a position where we maintain and manage what we've got, let alone some of the other stuff that is really important. So I think that will be important that we have a plan B. How do we ramp that up? Kay, you mentioned the carry forwards. I can't help but notice that, you know, 30% of our total, what looks like $18 million budget is carry forwards. And this is the bane of local government life, is the carry forwards. You know, and I'm highly generalising here, Stefan. So again, I want to go back and take on board one of the two key differences that you've raised. But I would be keen to understand, even in light of what, about 4.5 months left in this financial year, what is our strategy to maximise the chance that we can at least do our renewals, if not some of the other things? Sorry, was there a comment we'd like to make? No?
I mean, my only comment would be if you look at the categories, quite a lot of this work is renewal work anyway.
Yeah, I
Um,
understand. That. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a given. And I know that in terms of roading, they're picking up and we're going to either hit or be very close to programming roading by the end of the year,
Good.
which is the usual process for roading. It's usually all comes in at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Now's the tar season, isn't it, Jan? So you've hopefully got contractors out there.
And some of the things we've got to be mindful of, both of the water restrictions, but also the fire restrictions that we've got at the same time. So that does slow some things down.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder. Rightio, and then there's the rates review. Was there anything in particular there that either Charlie or Jan that struck your eyes?
Where are you up to? That's
The rates review.
Yes,
On the page there that you've been-
Page
page 73.
Mhm.
Yes,
Sorry,
well, yes, the amount of rates owing looks quite worrying.
So I remind you, committee members, rates owing for the current year includes anyone who's on a payment plan or a direct debit.
Oh,
Just by the technicality of setting quarterly payments due and then allowing people to have a payment plan that spreads them over the whole year, will by its very nature means that you've technically got
so it sort of makes
some rates owing.
almost makes
all
them
the
a
time.
detour in a way
Mhm.
along the way. Gosh, 'cause we can't report that in a way that kind of reflects that.
We
because
try very hard
Oh, sorry.
but
I thought
understanding, absolutely,
I
it's
thought
a
accounting
technical
could
topic.
do
Yeah.
everything.
I think I'd like to just point out some highlights.
Yeah.
Is that year comparison, so comparison to December last year, we have reduced the rates in arrears, so rates from previous financial years, from 110,000 to 94, from 40 rating units to 33. Excellent work there from the rates team. And one of the largest one has just entered into a payment plan there. So
Okay.
that's a very good move
Very good
there.
outcome.
So repayment plans have, as a result of now being paid off, reduced from 24 to 18. And that we are encouraging more people onto direct debit payments all the time. It's an easier way for people to pay. It smooths things out. And it also allows certainty for council as to when the cash flow is coming in. So last year we had 950 ratepayers on direct debit, and we've increased that to 1,146. So essentially added 1% of our rating base. And we are hoping to improve that even more.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you. That's helpful.
And the other thing which comes is the rates rebate scheme and how we can encourage people to pick up on that too, and as a process. So.
Absolutely. We every year send out rebate forms to everyone who received one the previous year, which is not a requirement. It's something we do to help people. And our rates officer actually goes and visits the retirement villages personally with a stack of forms and helps people fill them out for them. So our rates officer is worth her weight in gold.
Great.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Is it a
So,
new
yeah.
person?
No, she's out here, very experienced.
All right. Interesting. Yes, sir.
Kirsty.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Chair, could I just ask a question? Derek, what was your point about the rates arrears that you made in your presentation? The penalties, what was it you said?
Oh, well, the fact that big reason why the rates is up on the budget is the fact that you've hit people with 99,000 in penalties.
That was-
And see, it's the first line in white, the budget was 66. You know,
Penalties is a policy of council.
Yeah.
That is within.
Yeah, I thought you might explain that, just.
Yeah, so rates arrears, they are charged a 10% penalty. We have a very good penalty remission policy here that is very fair. Where, for example, someone has fallen behind because they didn't receive the notice in the post or things like that. Once they're paid up to date with their rates, they can apply for a penalty remission. We are very reasonable, I believe.
Thank you. Does that satisfy you?
Oh.
Yep.
I understand why it's changed. I just don't think it should be an automatic whack on 10%.
Thanks, Charlie.
Fact that we're putting 33 grand more than you needed from ratepayers who are struggling to pay, hitting them with a penalty is counterproductive.
Thanks, Charlie.
Through the chair, the point to that though is if they came and talked to the team about putting on a payment plan, they wouldn't get hit with penalties. So if you engage with a payment plan, penalties are withheld.
Thank you.
So I think,
Thank you, Chair.
I think the critical issue is here. And Jen, I seem to think about this with Far North. I seem to remember discussions around this. How do we make it easy is the wrong word, because I mean we're talking here about what people can afford. But in any sense, how do we provide the options to firstly pay so that you don't get into arrears, and secondly, if you're in arrears, how can you address that? So Jen, like your point, and Charlie, it's actually often the regular direct debits, which is helpful in terms of cash management for most households. And the more we can encourage, I suspect, the better we are at. I think you said 1,100 ratepayers. Just help me, please. How many ratepayers have we got in total in South Wairarapa?
About 7.5.
Yeah. Okay. So that's about 15% of our ratepayers on direct debit.
Yeah.
Which is good actually from a percentage point of view. That's good. Anything over 10% on direct debit is good.
Yeah. And it should be part and parcel. I mean, again, that's something, for instance, to that clearly is going to be part of the LTP, including our approach to remissions. So that's useful. Okay, look, that's really helpful. So look, I did want to then, Jan, go back to one question, and this is something where I think we're trialing here. How does the integration of the finance function with a risk committee, which generally has a different meeting cycle, how do we mesh the two so that there is still good finance oversight, but equally we're not making it hard? What is your plans around the next report and how it would be reviewed? Because I appreciate that will be before our next risk committee. I'm just wondering if there's been any thought around that.
Which report?
Finance report. I mean, given the distance between a traditional risk committee, is there an effective way for us to, in effect, support but also monitor the finances?
Absolutely. I mean, we do the reports every month, regardless of whether they come into this table or not. In fact, the one from September, because we didn't have a meeting scheduled, was actually sent to all of the councillors for review as a briefing, and also published on the website so that it is visible. But in the interim months, we could send them out as just a briefing document, and then you could feedback any questions or queries. The SLT go through them, or we'll be going through them every month anyway. Yes,
yeah. Look, I think that would be good. There is, and I guess I'm having a nod at Derek's point, we're a wee way away from the next meeting. And if we are to fulfill a level of monitoring, I think that would be useful. And look, probably
happy to do that. I mean, I acknowledge Mr. Anderton's point that by the time we get to the May, you're going to be getting the March on a quarterly cycle. So yeah, I totally understand that. I'm quite happy to send them out under a briefing and to put them on the website so that they're visible.
Brilliant. So Amy, just on that, I mean, if I could just be rude, if you could make certain that I'm included in that email, that would be really, really superb. So there we go, guys. You might be on my committee, but you get a bit of homework. So there we go. You can't get away from it. And I'll ring up and see who's done their homework, Martin. Okay, let's look at the resolution. Thank you for that, and Charlie, thank you for your presence at the meeting today to help us understand that further. I think there was only one outstanding question. You'll come back to me at some appropriate time over the rates in advance. So the recommendation is that we receive the report. I'll move that from the chair. Do we have a seconder, please? Please. Thank you, G'day. Appreciate that. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Can we move to the democracy and engagement update? A pretty big omnibus report, and I wonder if somebody would like to take us through that. G'day, Amanda. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Bruce?
Is it? Can I ask? Is it hot? Is it hot in that room?
What's forward feeling, yeah?
I don't say the word. Sorry, apologies.
No worries, Amanda. I must be hot in that room. All I can see you guys doing is waving paper in front of your faces. I take it's a bit airless and hot, is it?
Yeah.
It's hot, all right.
Yeah.
Need a 5-minute break. No,
Help if I open the door.
they probably won't dare open it after. I'm going to go to my happy place shortly.
Oh my God.
I'll drop off.
Music.
Or grandpa then.
Oh, that's better.
Nanny
I
nap.
feel the breeze straight away.
Grandpa then. I don't
No,
know.
nanny
if
nap.
sex is
No, nanny.
Right.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Back in the room.
We are in your hands. Salient points, please. And then we'll go
Thank you,
through the
Chair.
attachments line by line.
I want to preface the report by saying Janice and I had a conversation about pulling some of the things out of this report before it came to this committee, noting that the risk framework had been changed, for example, and I have managed to not do that. So I apologise, it was meant to happen. So if you can note that the risk framework will be updated and the risk register will be updated, noting the new policy and the new risk framework at the next meeting.
Right.
The other thing is council met this morning, obviously, and agreed on a resolution to move away from an LTP towards a 1 year
Enhanced.
enhanced AP. So the LTP update in the report is no longer relevant. But those were probably the big bits in the report. So the policy schedule of work is obviously just an FYI, just so that you've got visibility of what's ahead of us and the proposed timelines and anything that's in progress. I think because we've got our policy advisor is also the lead on doing the LTP project delivery. So she's, so to speak. Policy goes a little bit on hold while this bit of work, while the LTP is being prepared. But Janice obviously has done a massive amount of work in reviewing the policy, some of the financial ones that have been presented already. That's it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And yes, as you say, perhaps you've gutted your report with a couple of key decisions. And so I certainly look forward to perhaps a reforecast risk report, which would be important for us to get a handle over. Could I ask, Lise, could I lead off with a question, please, around the decision to move to an enhanced AP? Again, as I think it's obvious, Jan and I have had some useful discussions, and I think, Jan, you already hinted to me that this was a possible line that staff would recommend to council be adopted. Equally, I think, and I'm asking this from, I guess I'm trying to ask a question out of this. My presumption is, so it's really my question, that actually many of the bits that we have started to develop for LTP are still got to be supporting us, not necessarily to an auditable standard, but behind us, like almost like the draft LTP numbers.
Yep.
But in effect, the moves that we want to put into the enhanced annual plan move us in the direction of where we probably have to go with what otherwise would have been our current LT, our new 24/34 LTP. Do you understand what I'm saying? If it's just we're keeping rates down, if I can be blunt,
No.
it doesn't help next year because it makes the jump even bigger, probably, given some of the challenges we know that we're coming through with a current LTP. Is that a reasonable question, Jan?
There is no move to change the rate increase by moving to an enhanced annual plan.
Yeah.
So this isn't a rate reduction methodology. This is purely to allow us to complete some of the reporting and the background information we need around asset management, the Featherston Master Plan, reviewing our asset base, getting our AMPs in order, to give us a better platform for the LTP. So this is not in any way, shape or form being used to suppress a rate increase that's going to hit next year or the year after.
Yeah, look, I know it was probably an unfair question, but I think it's important that we just note that, because it is actually really important that what we do now doesn't hinder, future direction, and it's important that we continue.
Absolutely. The track that we're on hasn't changed. It just means that a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that we're currently grappling with will be in better shape.
Yep.
By doing what we're doing now.
Yeah, and without talking in too much coded terminology, you did indicate some of the challenges you've got around getting some of the supporting information that you need to have for the LTP. So it does reduce a wee bit of that pressure. It does mean, of course, that there is an elongated planning process for us in this particular tronium, doesn't it, Jan?
Yes, and that was noted in the report this morning, that we do have the public body elections coming in October 2025.
Yeah. I'm just thinking LTP next year, you're right, you've got elections, and then you're back into a normal cycle. So there's only a 2-year gap between LTPs. It is a bit of a load. Which ultimately has to be done anyway, but you just don't get a break, basically.
I don't think we've had a break for a long time, Bruce.
No, don't worry. Well, given we haven't dealt with health and safety, it worries me, actually. Yeah. Sorry, was it Collins?
Yeah, I just want to make an observation, I guess, by making that move from LTP to AP or enhanced AP in this particular year. A lot of we've spent quite a few months, actually, or staff, council officers spent a lot of time on preparing for an LTP. So that I don't believe that'll go to waste in terms of when we kickstart LTP next year. We've got the information to a large extent, and when we go out to consult, I would imagine the consulting document will be largely a lot different than what we've already had a conversation about now. So my personal belief is that a lot of that work's already done, so it's not going to load you up with additional work next year. It'll probably be a bit smoother if it is.
Yep. We know where the gaps are,
Yeah.
and we'll be working to filling those.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I'm conscious I've probably taken you through a conversation you actually have already rehearsed at council. So it was a set of questions that weren't really designed to relitigate the matter, but just to reflect from both a finance committee perspective, but actually also from a risk perspective, that there are some attendant knock-on impacts from that decision, and we should just be cognizant of it. But actually, the critical one is indeed the first question that, in my mind, that I asked and that you've answered positively, Jan, which is actually we're not trying to avoid something by going to an enhanced AP. We are trying to keep the momentum that you've built up through this LT.
Exactly, correct.
Yeah, correct.
It's better to whack. So that's really, really helpful. So thank you for that. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Actually, I was sitting with our new auditor today, by the way, Jan.
Oh yeah.
So the OAG rep that is responsible for the South Wairarapa. So I said it would be good for them to touch base with us, to be honest.
Yeah, we've got meetings next week, Bruce.
Oh, you have with them? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay, good. I was sort of, in some sense, we've dealt with the big thing. We're essentially, Amanda, you're saying we're going to get a new risk report based around the policy strategy and the work we've done around the risk framework for the new meeting.
Yep.
I think probably what I'd like to say, even in light of that, and I'd ask you, Amanda, but clearly Jan as well, or indeed any of your senior leadership team there, is there anything emergent, is there anything on the horizon that we might classify as probably affecting our risk profile at this stage?
Yep.
Sorry, Bruce, it's Paul. We had a talk about one of the issues at the last SLT meeting, and that was actually the interdependency of our work with the other Wairarapa councils and the implications of their decisions on our own strategy. We are experiencing some independent thought. Obviously, they're independent thought, they're independent councils, but through things like shared services, etc., that does pose a risk to us.
A practical example of that was the recent gambling policy, which has been a combined policy, and Masterton opted to take a slightly different direction that just takes a little bit more time to unravel and to negotiate your way through and to revise policy statements to ensure that you're meeting the needs of all three councils.
That explains what I took behind your comment about policy updates. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that means more work, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes. Time. I think decisions don't get made as rapidly as potentially they had been if everyone's on the same table in the same time. You just have to do a bit more backwards and forwards in.
And in some cases, unraveling previous work to have to redo. So an example is around the original intent of the shared services model with the other two Wairarapa councils, and they were set up largely out of goodwill and a desire to work with one another in a collegiate way. And obviously, as time has gone by, independent decisions around funding priorities, etc., and now causing some of those plans to deviate and that model of operating to deviate, which does pose a risk for us, as I say.
So, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? What probably arguably was a good opportunity around shared services, we're now casting in the light of a risk. Is this just being accepted, or is there some sort of more strategic response that should be contemplated across the three councils?
I think very much. Sorry, Jan, are you right with me answering?
Carry on.
Sure. So I'm on my soapbox now. I think there's a genuine need to go back to basics about what we're trying to achieve through shared services, and reset it to make sure we're very clear and aligned with our programme of work and the outcomes. They were set up in many cases with a desire naturally to save money, but with very different expectations on the outcomes. So there's a clear need to go back and re-engineer the purpose around shared services.
I'd just add to that, I think it's really important that all of councils understand their commitment to the shared service agreement. And we have had a surprise pop out of one of our neighbouring councils that we hadn't anticipated and certainly hadn't discussed at this point. So that's what causes the risk, because all of a sudden our position is at risk because of a decision made by them that wasn't communicated in advance.
It strikes me, I'm looking at my colleagues around the table, and I mean, I know Martin's not here as mayor, and I'm not saying it's a mayoral problem, but this is a political problem in the first place, isn't it? We need to bang some head. Well, this is a terrible phrase. Don't quote me, please, if anybody's listening. You know, in the wise way that you said it, Paul, it seems like potentially there's a wee bit of back to basics here that need to be established. But I think that needs the political lead across the valley, doesn't it? Not just officials talking to officials.
Yeah, we've got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, we've got. Sorry, So sometimes I better keep my mouth shut.
The elephant in the room.
Yes.
If we don't achieve anything, if only one of us, or what would it be, the politicians or the operational staff actually takes a lead on something, it needs to be a double hit.
Elephant, not in the room.
Is this, Jen, is this something that, is there a combined mayoral forum-y thing in the valley that would,
Yep,
Yeah,
that is this something that we would look to pick up?
some of this has come out of the semi-amalgamation talks as the working
has it,
group as well, where
obviously I can't speak for the other two councils, but it's their process that they've been through for their LTP.
Yeah.
And we're all doing them at the same time, but slightly different as at the same time as well. So it's a result of some of the discussions they've had around their tables. Have popped into our inboxes result. But yes, there is a combined leadership group for the Wairarapa district. So all three councils, mayors and CEs come together. And the rest of the councillors, I think you're all invited to those meetings. I think, didn't I bump into?
no, we're not, no,
No,
I didn't recall seeing that, no.
no, we're not, no.
It just does.
Just officers.
Oh, yeah, just
Deputies and
mayor, deputy mayor and yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Through you, Chair, just to answer a little bit more to your question, I think some of the other risks that we're currently holding are, so the big one has been the unknown post-election and the water reform in particular, but we've also got the Resource Management Act reform. So this, I think we're starting to see that have some direction. So the risk is probably shifting away from uncertainty towards how do we now implement those changes, and that will be something we'll need to look at over the next few months. I imagine that risk statement will change slightly.
You're talking about resource management and Three Waters.
Yeah, just that. So previously we'd framed the risk about the unknown, so that we didn't know what the election was going to
Oh,
have,
okay, yeah.
what position, if we had a new government, what position that new government would take and what the potential reform might look like. So now we've got a new government, they've given us a pretty clear direction and they're starting to implement changes to legislation. So I think that risk statement will need to change to reflect that.
Yes, perhaps, and let me just put a different view, perhaps, Amanda, just so that I can clarify what you're saying. And yet equally with this LTP, we are as uncertain as we were before the elections.
Okay.
Because, anybody preparing an LTP and adopting it at 30 June this year has got an LTP that is wrong. You're not going to have Three Waters assets for 10 years, are you? I mean, we'll all be out of business.
Yeah.
So somewhere down the track, and this is the uncertainty of it, somewhere down the track, Three Waters for our necessity is going to leave our balance sheet, surely. And then we've got the uncertainty, and we've had it in the last couple of days with Standard & Poor's coming out, noting that it's downgraded 15, or it's put 15 councils on negative watch, saying hardline, there needs to be balance sheet separation. In our water. So
Not according to Simeon Brown.
So look, yeah, that's right. So look, I mean, all I'm wanting to reflect here, and I'm not making this as a political statement at all, whether, it's not about Labor reform, it's not about national reforms. But while what is definite is that we're not having the Labor form of reforms, what water looks like for us going, if we were doing the LTP today, I'll tell you now, in fact, I told it to your colleagues just over the hill, I mean, they agreed as well. Our LTP isn't right in a fundamental way because we've still got Three Waters in there, and we know that that's not the answer going forward. And you guys are a part and parcel of the process about how we might or might not work that one out going forward. But so that's
Yep.
my diatribe. Just coming back to your comment, Amanda, that I think this is still an area of heightened risk.
Yep.
Even though Minister Brown has been incredibly definite, we won't have Labor reform, and it's you've got to come up with the answer. And it's got to be a sustainable answer. But we're uncertain. I mean, listen to S&P, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're in a difficult position, I think, still, particularly around Three Waters.
Reflect a bit more accuracy. Yeah.
Sorry, I've talked over top of one or two of my colleagues here. Sorry.
No, not a bit. We'll just pass some comment, Bruce, and I think you're absolutely right, because we have to reflect accuracy and how we move forward. And you're absolutely right. I don't believe that water will be part of our overall budgeting in the future, no matter what form it takes. It'll either go to a CCO or something of that nature. And we've had some, indications from central government about how they plan to move on that. But probably officers are probably more in favour with that than us councillors, to be quite honest.
No, I appreciate that, and that'll. So look, that's really. But don't get me wrong, man. If I might have a slightly different view to you, but it does. You're quite right to still have that on our sort of risk radar as being a significant challenge for us, because of course I keep coming back to the importance of Three Waters to us as a district, and it's absolutely pivotal to who we are and who we want to be going forward, I would have thought. So it is still a critical and quite strategic risk for us.
Russ, what were you going to say?
Yeah, thanks. So Bruce, your question was quite promptful, and rightly so. You've been given two examples, a micro example from Paul and a macro from Amanda. As a functioning SLT with a new CEO, we're pretty abreast of the importance of risk and thinking deep and wide on the topic. Can I turn the question back to you and say, is there something that we may not be looking at? Because our ears pricked up to risk generally. Is there something you were offering up from Three Waters?
I think. No, thank you for the question, and look, that's a good challenge. It's part of the value that I should be bringing is what am I seeing elsewhere around the country? The sector at the moment is all wrapped up in its LTPs, and I mean, I think what we're talking about, Three Waters, how do you plan in this uncertain environment, is actually starting to affect all your colleagues around the country, and I liken it this way. Again, whether it was right or wrong, we've all gone through the Labor form of water reform or process. And actually, and again, whether you want to take it back a peg or two, the process of us working collectively with the NTU around what do our renewal profiles look like, is creating significant carnage now around the country. And there's a number of councils where you can't not know better information. And so as you bring back in your renewal information to your long-term plans, but your funding levers and mechanisms and settings haven't changed, there is an inevitable disjoint. There is a real liquidity crisis in front of us across the sector. And that's a real that is real for many councils. There are a number where that is a real crunch, and that's both growth councils, but it's also councils, dare I say it, with lower ratepayer bases. So there is this is dominating a lot of discussion and risk in the sector at the moment. Look, and off that, and Stefan, you may be in a better position to talk about this, for instance, than I am. It makes it very difficult on a portion of your staff. So those that are still involved in Three Waters, and I keep hearing this from around the country, those involved in Three Waters to some extent at the moment are even less certain. You know, again, I'm not arguing for the Labor reform, but actually under the old rules, it was clear they were all going to go off to the new 4 new entities, and indeed the 10, and there was some certainty there. Well, again, we're back with that uncertainty. So the knock-on impacts of ongoing outstanding reform are affecting councils around the country. And I'm just saying this as fact. Again, I want to stress I'm not making political statements here. So it becomes a question, how do we, for those councils particularly, how do they manage just maintaining a viable core in some key areas of their actual work? So I'd pass that on as being a view. I don't know how that's affecting us directly in South Wairarapa, but if it is, you are in good company. They would be the big things that stand out at the moment. Actually, there's a lot going on also from a risk, if I could say it, from a risk perspective, around the regulatory environment, which again comes back to not so much, I don't mean so much resource management reform, although that will impact it, but actually it's being able to staff and maintain an effective regulatory function, whether that's from the planning side through to the consenting and enforcement side. There seems to be challenges to staff that, make it viable. That's particularly a district, a rural-based issue, which I'm seeing around the country as well. So I don't know whether that answers your questions. That gives you a sense of what I'm seeing elsewhere at a high generalisation. How they could or should impact South Wairarapa, perhaps we'll leave it for a discussion next time we get there, although you may have some comments now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Why don't we just return to the paper and just very quickly just honour the good work you've got here, Amanda. And it may be genuine. Item 6, governance, your sort of priorities to date. Is there anything there that seems logical that you're dealing with that? Although interesting to see you got a representation review in the middle of all this madness. Things like that. It shows you that it never stops, does it? Is there anything around that sort of governance area that warrants being discussed at this point?
I think everything feels under control. With,
that's good.
the freedom camping bylaw is a piece that has recently been out for consultation. Consultation closed last year and will come back to council with a report council meeting. The Featherston master plan submissions have just closed on that. And then the representation review is the next cab off the rank, I imagine. With the joint policies with Carterton and Masterton, gambling is currently out for review and alcohol is in discussion. So our advice with alcohol would just to be not to move too quickly, because we've got quite a lot of consultation out at the moment, and the community will quickly experience engagement fatigue, knowing that we've got to go out for consultation for the enhanced annual plan very shortly. So that happens in April. So we'll keep to that LTP timeline broadly, but instead of it being an LTP, obviously it'll be an enhanced annual plan.
And of course, the issue with an enhanced annual plan, by the way, as you well know, is you have to do it by 30 June.
Yes.
You don't have the license that the LTP has to go out to 30 September. So I get your point.
No.
Which we weren't taking anyway, so.
No, I understand that.
Until 30 June.
Yeah. Anything around the Lagoima request that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I was finding it hard to work out the trend, because one's in 12 months and there's a couple of 3 months. Getting better, or was it getting worse?
It's pretty stable, I would say. Amy might want to comment on this as an officer. It's because she does most of the work. We have a small number of people who are very interested in council work and often ask for information as a result of that high level of interest. and engagement. But if you take those out of the picture, it's reasonably stable. And it comes in waves. So if something is contentious, then we will get more information requests. So, for example, Payne Farm has been of interest in recent weeks, days, and no doubt we will get some more information requests over the coming days and weeks regarding that information. Luckily, we had a Lagoima, this is one of the advantages of having the public release policy. We had a Lagoima towards the end of last year asking for a whole lot of information regarding Payne Farm. So we have put that on the website, and now we can just, if anyone comes for a Lagoima requesting the same information, we just point them to that existing Lagoima. So that's been a really helpful addition to our workflow.
And I noticed that I think Janice has been in personal meetings with some of our more frequently interested people, which I think I commend you on doing that, Janice, because I think hopefully, hopefully.
I don't know that it makes a difference. Paul and I did it and Harry did it before that. I don't know that it actually makes a huge, I mean, obviously.
Guess what, just to try.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to have that open and transparent communication, and that's a really important part of democratic process. And Amy and I have been looking at the Ombudsman's recent report around workshops as well, and we've been having a little bit of chat today while you guys have been having your conversations about the next steps with having a really clear guide for both councillors and our appointed members on our Māori Standing Committee around when do you make a workshop public? When don't you? What's the process around that? How do you collect notes and information? How do you make those public as well? So just improving that commitment to transparency is probably something we do care about.
Yeah, and look, I think some of my engagements where we have looked at those workshops, we have, you sort of have to adopt the idea of transparency, which is the presumption that they will be open workshops unless. Whereas probably our attitude generally has been the other way around. So it just takes a bit of rewiring, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay, look, that's good. Is there anything else then, Amanda, or is anything else members would like to raise about Amanda's report?
Very good.
Brilliant. I heard very good. I'm trying to get through by 4 o'clock, people, because I sense you've had a long day.
Thank you.
So I think we will just keep going. Yeah. Can I just move us to the recommendations then, or recommendation, which is that we receive this report. Do a move in a seconder, please.
Happy to move that.
Thank you. And
Second that.
thank you. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Right, can we move to the health and safety report, please? And who might be speaking on that?
Yep.
Paul is? G'day, Paul.
Right. So this is the first time that the health and safety report has been brought to this committee, of course. So we're going to take it as read. The reason why it's important for this committee, of course, is that under the Health and Safety at Work Act, whilst the chief executive is an officer, so are elected members. However, the only difference is that elected members can't be held personally liable for breaches to the Act, whereas Janice has the pleasure of that being that person. The way in which we are going to structure it, and we'd of course welcome any feedback, is to highlight the top 5 health and safety risks to the organisation, and then update you on an ongoing basis at each meeting. So, as I say, we're going to take it as read. I'm just going to spotlight a couple of things. The work around site-wise pre-qualification is ongoing. This is with a view to having greater surety over our contractors and our other people who are delivering services for and on behalf of council.
Sorry, PCBUs, what does that mean?
It's the person, now, all acronyms, here we go.
Yeah, I can't.
Person conducting a
The
business
business, yeah,
undertaking.
person conducting the business.
That's enough.
Yeah, so, yeah, so it's ultimately the person, the officer that's got responsibility over health and safety practice.
Thank you.
And sorry, yeah, I should have opened up with that. And any organisation, there is such a designated officer. So the challenge we have got is just to flag some of the broader health and safety risks is that we've got quite a highly outsourced model of delivering services to the community. And as a consequence, we have a lot of contracted services. So our interactions with those service providers is something that I'd say we're on a bit of a scale of maturity, and we're getting better line of sight over their health and safety practices, their rigor, how much rigor they have, because some of the smaller contractors, of course, have probably less in terms of formalised process versus some of the larger contractors, like, for example, Fulton Hogan, are exceptional when it comes to managing health and safety risk on the site in the main. The other thing I'd point out is that, as with any organisation, we have struggled historically with engagement internally around a so-called health and safety committee, because it's seen quite transactional in nature. It's almost a big approach to ensuring compliance within the organisation. So I encouraged Nigel, who is our lead advisor for health, safety and emergency management, to rethink this approach and actually adopt a well-being focus. I'm a big believer that if you focus on people's well-being, go home safe at night after a good day's work, then you will drive good health and safety practice as a consequence. So it's a mindset shift, and a new committee is being launched with that in mind. So and it touches on all aspects of health and safety, including psychological well-being, harassment, bullying, all of the things that wouldn't necessarily come into play if you were just focusing on compliance-based reporting for health and safety. Those are the main pieces, really. I'd like to get any feedback from you, but also just a heads up that we would be looking to maybe even broadening this a wee bit into with an emergency management lens as we move forward as well, just to show it's coming to an appropriate group.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Appreciate that.
I might ask Mr. Gardner a question, if that's all right.
You go for it.
Yeah, so just in terms of council's thinking with some of the bigger works that we've got coming up, like the Taranaki pipeline, where there's a real desire to have our local contractors come along and carry and quote or put a tender in on those works. And one of the problems we face is it's so risk averse that it has a tendency to drive those small contractors from not even considering putting in prices or tendering for this
Exactly.
stringent regime we have for health and safety. I'm not taking that away. Sorry, I'm not saying we should take that model away, but I'm just wondering whether or not council and as contractors, or Wellington Water for that matter, can take a more pragmatic approach to it rather than something that's etched in concrete. And I take a leaf out of traffic management plans. You know, I mean, to fix a water main, we have to have a traffic management plan that basically wraps everybody up in cotton wool. That costs about $6,000 before they fix the $1,500 leak. You know, this is the top end of it all, and it really worries me how much we invest as a council, or our ratepayers invest on that big picture health and safety stuff. It's hugely expensive. Hugely expensive.
It does come down ultimately to your risk appetite and where the risk falls should anything occur, and on the mitigations that you've got in place to reduce the risk.
Yep.
It is it's always good. You're never going to be able to eliminate risk. but it's about managing it. But ultimately, what we don't want is examples of things that we've had where certain less experienced contractors have been allowed to access council buildings, for example, working at heights without any safety equipment. It's the basics. And forgive me, obviously I'm English, but this idea of it'll be all right kind of culture that some people have got isn't all right. And, you know, we've got to be realistic, and we've got to be measured in terms of how we manage the risk, but nor can we allow for irresponsible behaviour to occur on site as well.
Positively, sorry, Kate.
Sorry,
So no.
just that saying that legislative requirement.
Not all of it, no, not all of it.
But we're seeing this as a positive engagement, those that we're actively encouraging those that aren't, I'm not saying you're out.
We're taking an educational.
It's an educational life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Positive.
How can we help you do it?
Yeah.
And don't bother even asking.
So
That's good.
Oh, but could I clarify that? It's just an important point. So Colin, what you're saying is that we're going beyond the legislative requirement?
No,
No.
through the chair, no, we're not.
We're just going.
Any contractor who submits for work has to submit a health and safety plan on how they will keep their workers safe on site.
Yes.
We obviously need to be sure, as much as we can be, that when they come to work in the morning, they're going to go home at night. And some of the things that we do have a higher risk factor than others. When you're dealing with road networks and when you're trenching or you're working in confined spaces, they have a very different protocol around them to some of the other things we do.
Yes.
So we're very cognizant of that. Recently, there was somebody who unfortunately was crushed on a roading site in Whangarei, I believe, recently because something happened and that happened. And you know, when I worked for the Far North, we were very interested in how many people were working in confined spaces in our water that we didn't know about, and what were the safety mechanisms around them. But to what Paul said, I've equally seen people on roofs of buildings with no harnesses whatsoever, you know, balancing and going along the roof space, and call the health and safety officer.
Long saw going up and standing on it.
And whatever, but we need to be reasonably sure that the people that are working for us are taking the necessary precautions to keep their people safe.
So just to come back to it, so we are really just asking for the legislative required level. Is that what we're doing? We're not growing a whole lot of extra.
No,
Because I know the
we're just asking for
legislative
people, we're just asking for people to be safe.
be good employers, basically.
Yeah, we're doing our legal
Yes,
requirements.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I want to know. So we can't argue about that. We just have to do that. Yeah. So, yeah.
So the requirements are fairly generic in terms of achieving good outcomes, I guess, in terms of health and safety, because that's what the tool's designed to do.
Absolutely.
And we prescribe what we expect at the end of the day from our contractors in terms of their health and safety. And
It's maybe just as we do internally for our own staff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Reporting in terms of monitoring something as simple as, you know, being in reception and seeing one of your anti-slip mats rolled over is a trip hazard, all the way through to being out on site and running the risk of being crushed by something. And you know, there are certain sites out there that do have specific legislative requirement based on the site. Kiwi Rail, for example, and working on the rail corridor, have specific site requirements. So, and things that we just can't shy away from.
so it doesn't cover councillors because, I mean, clearly there's a trip has
Yeah.
at chairs we've been sitting on now for about 6.5 hours, 7 hours, aren't that particularly comfortable or good for the posture. You know?
And it may,
I just thought I'd make that comment.
And I would, councillor, I would also point out that individuals also have a personal responsibility.
Right, I wonder.
it might be too soon, in the light of Afiso Collins' passed. A ban on councillors doing charity runs as well would probably be a good health and safety.
No pay Safety.
I had no safety.
Right, let's move on.
Okay,
I wonder if we
Yeah,
could, yes, I wonder if we could round out the conversation and just a couple of observations, Paul. I'm comfortable, with the risk schedules as you've got them, and in effect, you're comfortable that those risks, which is working at heights, vehicles driving on roads, and working with other PCBUs, are at a moderate level. That's possibly as far as we can go, actually, because the problem is, unfortunately, there will be an accident. You can't, it's difficult to know we eliminate. So it's interesting to then look at some of the stats, and two really have tracked my mind. One is the instances of speeding 10 kilometres above the limit. So obviously this is E-roads on our vehicles, right? And you are, in a good sense, reducing that, which is fine. Perhaps the worrying one is staff with outstanding leave balances. And we did talk a wee bit about the ongoing line of work. Is there any comment you've got to make about that second stat?
Yeah, so anybody with more than 20 days annual leave balance has to have an active leave management reduction plan in place. That's something that the manager is then required to work through with the individual to try and pull it down over a period of time. Individuals are also, where they've got excessive leave, pardon me, asked to consider payouts because there is a certain amount that can be paid out per year, generally 5 days. So 1 week's worth of annual leave per year. However, that is really secondary to actually taking the leave itself, because annual leave is about well-being and resting from work and not being in work, just being paid out to, an extra lump of money. So, yes, for those people with an excess of 20 days annual leave, there are active leave in place.
Yes, as you say, paying out doesn't do it. Doesn't necessarily solve the benefit of time. So look, I hear your point. Active management is being driven by SLT through your managers' expected plan. And I presume, obviously, you've got the whip hand, wrong word, terrible phrase, but there's follow through that actually there is an implementable plan in place. I hope you're holding yourselves to the same account, by the way. Jan, I know you're new in the organisation, but I suspect one or two of you in the room probably have a bit of leave without knowing what your actual leave balances are. So I hope that's the
I've got no leave, so.
I know.
I think just spent 5 weeks in Canada. I can't really say that I'm.
Okay, so we won't put Amanda on the spot, but yeah, okay.
As for your comment on the excessive speed, corrective actions are in place, and the driving policy is currently being reviewed, and is obviously, as it's an operational policy, it will be taken to SLT for approval. But let's say the margin of acceptable error is being proposed to be significantly reduced, and obviously there are disciplinary implications. Because we're talking about a brand and reputation of the organisation, because these in the main are marked council vehicles, branded council vehicles.
Are they GPS monitored, are they?
They are speed monitored, yes.
So how often do you review the?
Weekly.
Oh, do you? Yeah. Okay.
And we report back to the manager on those people who are exceeding the speed limit. So
There's an extra measure, I'm having that brought to the SLT table as well. So we all see them.
Yep.
Well, thank you for that. That's really helpful, Paul, and Jam, that final comment. That's again encouraging from a governance perspective to hear that these are being discussed at the SLT table, because we've got a lot to do to encourage all of you with health and safety, but it really requires, in my experience, particularly the sponsorship of SLT. So well done. I'm glad to hear that. I think our time is moving on. I just wonder if folk, there are no more burning questions around health and safety. could we move to the resolution then, please, which is that we receive the update? I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Kay. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. That leaves us to, I think, our final paper, which is the actions item report. Amy, anything that you need to raise here?
So there was one open action, which was 388. I just wanted to check that you were happy to see if you wanted to close that.
Close that, can't we?
Pardon?
We can close that, can't we?
Through the chair, I would say you can.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the reason why not.
Good.
I believe you had a workshop on insurance and
Yeah,
Yeah. So 3B,
easy.
3B you've done, I think.
Right, so then there's no open action.
You want to move that we close that action item? Does it have to be by way of resolution or can just be removed? Yes.
No, I just think we can remove it. That's done. Okay,
Sounds good.
I like that idea. Good. That's it.
Right.
Is there not normally, we should have a motion though that we receive the paper. Sorry, that we to know that it's there, I would have thought. So can I suggest that I move from the chair that we receive the update on action items? Can I have a seconder, please?
Oh, could we get Narita to do, Narita's being ignored. Do you want to have a?
Yeah,
Do you want
fine, I'll
to-
second it.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't realised you were here. Oh, my. Look,
No, we've been ignoring it, sorry.
It's very quiet, isn't it, Rita?
look, actually, that's interesting because I've tried to put my camera onto, the show everybody that's on. So, Rita, sorry about that. For some reason, it doesn't show you. You must have some good secrecy sitting on your camera.
It's okay.
Hadn't picked you up. My apologies for that. It's good to acknowledge that you're here. So you're going to second this. Well done. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Jan, have I got us to the end of the agenda? I think that's been a very useful discussion this afternoon.
Very good.
We've got ourselves on a roll. Certainly my preference that I'll be there next time when we meet, but thank you for allowing me to be here by way of Zoom and meeting my timing requirements too. Thank you. Jen, nothing else that we need to consider at this stage?
no, we're good.
Look at that. And it's time to go. I can see that cup of tea in your hand or something. Perhaps it's a glass of wine at this time of night. Okay, well, look, with that, in terms of closing it, could I ask again somebody, because I must
Grounds.
want to meet the Karakea, please.
Grounds.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's just something about grants here though. Did I hear,
Just before you close,
I just wanted to have an offline conversation with Bruce afterwards about a grants meeting.
Yeah. Are you able to stay online at the conclusion of the meeting for 5 minutes, Bruce?
Yeah, look, I can. Yep.
Okay, cool.
That's fine. Yep. I've got my next commitment 6:15, so I've got to.
Oh, great. Well, we don't want to.
Not that I want to take 2 hours. So
I don't want that longer.
is somebody able to? But is somebody able just to Karakea for me, please?
Yep,
as we.
sure. Kua mutu a mātou mahi, o tēnei wā manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hua, o mātou whānau, ai ki te aorangi.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Meeting's closed.
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you, staff that might be leaving, or if you are, thank you for your work. I do appreciate it.